Bismillah, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Now we come to the final story of the four stories which are mentioned in Surah Al-Kahf. The first story was Ashab al-Kahf, or the youth of the cave. And the second story was the men with the two gardens, the two men with the one with two gardens. And it was showing you the test of money, fitnat al-mal. And the third qissa is the qissa of Musa ma'al Khidr, which is the Prophet Musa sallallahu alayhi wasallam with the Prophet Khidr. And again, this is a story about knowledge. And finally, we have the story of Dhul-Qarnain, and this is a story pertaining to sovereignty and leadership. And in this story, there is mention of Ya'juj and Ma'juj, who are, as you know, from the alamat as-sa'a, from the major signs of the hour. They're also mentioned in this story. So let's have a look. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, and this is in ayat number 83, وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنْ ذِي الْقَرْنَيْنِ قُلْ سَأَتْلُو عَلَيْكُمْ مِنْهُ ذِكْرًا. And they ask you about Dhul-Qarnain, say, I will recite to you about him a report. Who's they in this question? It's either the people of the Yahud directly, i.e. the Jews, followers of Musa alayhi salam, and this story follows on from the story of Musa, or it refers to the Quraysh saying to the Yahud, telling them, ask the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam about Dhul-Qarnain, i.e. if he's a prophet and a Nabi with revelation, then he'll know about Dhul-Qarnain. So this is how the story begins. وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ, they ask you, right? And Dhul-Qarnain. Dhul-Qarnain, it's mentioned that he was a prophet. It's also mentioned that he was a pious, just king, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given him, or due to his taqwa and his piety, this kingdom, and this kingdom was expansive. It was, for example, some scholars mention it was equivalent to the east and the west. So, for example, if you used to think back then, Persia and Rome, or all of that was considered the world at that time, right? يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنْ ذِي الْقَرْنَيْنِ قُلْ سَأَتْلُو عَلَيْكُمْ مِنْهُ ذِكْرًا. Say, I will recite to you about him the dhikra, i.e. the report or the remembrance or the mention. So the story begins, ayat number 84. إِنَّا مَكَّنَّا لَهُ فِي الْأَرْضِ وَآتَيْنَاهُ مِنْ كُلِّ شَيْءٍ سَبَبًا. Indeed, we established him upon the earth, and we gave him to everything away. We gave him away to everything, i.e. what this means, وَآتَيْنَاهُ مِنْ كُلِّ شَيْءٍ سَبَبًا. We gave him a knowledge and an understanding that allowed him and gave him access to everything, knowledge, for example. So you find, for example, if a person has knowledge and understanding, he's able to, for example, build. He can be an architect, he can be an engineer, he can be... So imagine if he had the knowledge of all of those sciences, of geography, of traveling, then he has basically sababa, i.e. a means to everything. That's why it says we gave him to everything a way. And this is through knowledge. All right? إِنَّا مَكَّنَّاهُ لَهُ فِي الْأَرْضِ. And we established him upon this earth. Meaning he was the Malik, he was the king of the dunya. Right? I.e. his mulk, or he had a lot of sovereignty on the world, on this dunya, this worldly life. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it easy for him to have all of this kingdom and to traverse from one side of another. Which is why it says after وَآتَيْنَاهُ مِنْ كُلِّ شَيْءٍ سَبَبًا فَأَتْبَعَ سَبَبًا. So he followed the way, right? And if you remember in the previous story, with Musa alayhi salam is فَانْطَلَقَ حَتَّى. Right? Then he proceeded until he reached the place. Here, فَأَتْبَعَ سَبَبًا. So he followed the way. And here you have حَتَّى again. فَأَتْبَعَ سَبَبًا حَتَّى إِذَا بَلَغَ مَغْرِبَ الشَّمْسِ وَجَدَهَا تَغْرُبُ فِي عَيْنٍ حَمِئَةٍ وَوَجَدَ عِنْدَهَا قَوْمًا قُلْنَا يَا ذَا الْقَرْنَيْنِ إِمَّا أَن تُعَذِّبَ وَإِمَّا أَن تَتَّخِذَ فِيهِمْ حُسْنًا. So he followed the way until when he reached the setting of the sun, Maghrib al-Shams. Maghrib al-Shams, Maghrib is when the sun sets. He found it as if it was setting in a spring of dark mud. And he found near it a people, i.e. at this place. Allah said, here, He says, قُلْنَا, we said, i.e. and this we here is Allah. قُلْنَا يَا ذَا الْقَرْنَيْنِ, O ذَا الْقَرْنَيْنِ, either you punish them or else you adopt among them a way of goodness. Here, it speaks about where the sun sets. So this is, as you know, the furthest west. And he came across a people. And these people, the scholars say, they were a people who he called them to Islam and justice. Those amongst them who were arrogant and disbelievers in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then they're the ones that imma an tu'adhiba, they were punished. Alright? And this punishment was, the scholars mentioned, the scholars of Tafsir, they mentioned they were punished by death. وَإِمَّا أَن تَتَّخِذَ فِيهِمْ حُسْنًا, or you can adopt amongst them a way of goodness, meaning invite them to Islam and pardon them and forgive them. And this here, when it says قُلْنَا يَا ذَا الْقَرْنَيْنِ, we said to, O ذَا الْقَرْنَيْنِ, the scholars that say that he was a Nabi, he was a prophet and a messenger, they mention this as proof for that, because it is قُلْنَا, we said, يَا ذَا الْقَرْنَيْنِ, O ذَا الْقَرْنَيْنِ, then this is wahi, because when Allah speaks to the people, then it has to be wahi to revelation to prophets. Other scholars say no, what here it means is ilham, i.e. we gave him this intuition, or we inspired in him this, right? I.e. to punish him all. And he was a just king. What was his reply? So here you have, what did he decide? All right, ayat number 87, it says, قال أما من ظلم فسوف نعذبه ثم يرد إلى ربه فيعذبه عذابا نكرا. He said, as for the one who does wrong, أما من ظلم, ظلم here means أما من كفر, disbelieves, because the biggest dhulm is kufr, then we will punish him. نعذبه ثم, then he will be returned to his Lord and he will punish him with a terrible punishment. فَيُعَذِّبُهُ عَذَابًا نُكْرًا. And if you remember in the previous story of Qissa of Musa alayhi salam, it mentions the same thing, nukra, is repeated. Then ayat number 88 says, وَأَمَّا مَنْ آمَنَ وَعَمَلَ صَالِحًا فَلَهُ جَزَاءً الْحُسْنَى وَسَنَقُولُ لَهُ مِنْ أَمْرِنَا يُسْرًا. As for him who believes and does righteous deeds, آمَنَ وَعَمَلَ صَالِحًا. As for him who believes and does righteous deeds, he will have a reward of paradise. جَزَاءً الْحُسْنَى, meaning this recompense which is husna, the scholars, is the translation here says paradise, and this is the tafsir of it, right? Because it doesn't say we will give him Jannah, فَلَهُ جَزَاءً الْحُسْنَى, it says he will give him a good recompense. Here, what the scholars say, they say it means paradise. And in another narration mentioned, the scholars also say it means a'mal al-hasana, good deeds, good deeds. So he will increase in his good deeds as a result of his good deeds, and increase in good in this worldly life. وَسَنَقُولَ لَهُ مِنْ أَمْرِنَا يُسْرًا. And we will give him and make things easy for him. We will speak to him from our command with ease. Okay, and so this is the two circumstances, two types of people and how they are to be dealt with. ثُمَّ أَتْبَعَ سَبَبًا. And then he followed the way. So now he's past these first group of people, and this is where the sun set in the west. Then look, حتى إذا بلغ مطلع الشمس وجدها تطلع على قوم لم نجعل لهم من دونها سترا, until he came to the rising of the sun, and the sun rises in the east, so the furthest east, right? So he's gone from west to east, and this is from the ways that Allah facilitated for him. And when he came to the rising of the sun, he found it rising on a people for whom we had not made against it any shield. Right? So this is a people who the heat of the sun used to rise upon them to the point that to get into there was no shade. Remember, we had not made against it any shield, meaning that there wasn't a shade for them. So the burning sun, it was on them. So what did they used to do? The scholars have mentioned that to protect themselves from the sun, they used to make during the day holes in the ground where they would shield themselves, or they used to shield themselves away from the sun in the ground during the day. Right? كذلك وقد أحطنا بما لديه خبرا. Likewise, and we encompassed all that he had in knowledge. Yeah, this likewise, i.e., the scholars mention, like one of two things, i.e., the hukum that was for the previous people, meaning that whoever disbelieves and he's going to receive a punishment, whoever believes he's going to be rewarded with paradise in the afterlife and good in this life, also applies to these people, right? Because وَجَدَهَا تَطْلُ عَلَى قَوْمٍ لَمْ نَجْعَلْ لَهُم مِّن دُونِهَا سِتْرًا. i.e., these people, right, this qawm, كَذَلِكَ حُكْمُهُمْ حُكْمُ الَّذِي قَبْلَهُم, i.e., their ruling is the same as the ruling of those that came before them. Another tafsir of this ayah is not their ruling, but likewise, like how he went to the furthest west, he also went to the furthest east. However, the first is more closer. ثُمَّ أَتْبَعَ سَبَبًا, and then he followed away. Again, it shows the journey, this journey, right? Okay, then he followed away حتى إذا بلغ بين السدين وجد من دونهما قوما لا يكادون يفقهون قولا, until when he reached a pass between two mountains. So imagine two mountains. Now he's reaching a place where it's in between two mountains. At that point, he found beside these two mountains, a people who could hardly understand his speech. قَوْمًا لَا يَكَادُونَ يَفْقَهُونَ قَوْلًا. They almost didn't understand any speech. Right? So if you imagine a people that were wild and they hadn't been in communication with anybody else, they don't understand the speech of anyone, and people can barely understand what they are saying. Right? So they have their own completely distinct language, and perhaps they're not even speaking. For example, that لا يفهمون كلام أحد. They don't understand the speech of anyone, let alone anyone understands their speech.